right, we're live. Hello and welcome to Fermenting Opinions. I'm your host, David Popoiden.
I'm your co-host, James McVeigh.
And we are Fermenting Opinions, the political podcast in search of a more palatable political ferment.
Go ahead and take it away. Today we're going to discuss Donald Trump Jr.'s emails. We're also going to discuss the implications that come from that. The versions of events from Donald Trump Jr., from the Russian lawyer he met with, anybody else who had something to say, I suppose, that might actually be a real credible witness, how that applies to everything else we know, and where that leads us as far as, I guess, criminal liability might go, or, I guess, political liability.
I just want to know if we can impeach him yet. Are we there yet?
I would not say so. Well, we discussed this before.
But we're gonna get into all this. Sure.
We will. We are joined tonight by our great friend Siobhan Ray, who is a very frequent contributor with us. Siobhan,
say hi.
Hello.
Hey, there she is.
There it is.
Also making sure the audio is working.
Yes, that does work. Yes, indeed. So where do we want to begin? Should we begin with the fact that Donald Trump Jr. was reported to have had contact with a Russian lawyer?
And how did that come out? I think the interesting, because I'm going to be more useful contributing tonight without getting into all the technical legal stuff, is the fact that apparently three unnamed White House officials leaked, I guess, information regarding this email exchange, saying, hey, by the way, this happened. And so Junior decided to get out in front of it, I guess, when he was asked for comment by...
Well, I think we might be putting the cart before the horse as far as that goes. Initially, there was a New York Times report that these emails occurred, that a meeting occurred, and then we kind of started getting more details with new reports from the New York Times. At some point, the New York Times asked for comment from Donald Trump Jr., and he ignored them and then decided to use Twitter to publish the emails himself.
Right.
And then we got a series of emails from him, including one that really went to the heart of the matter, at least in my opinion. And this is a matter of contention. I mean, some people say that it's a big old nothing burger or whatever the words they prefer are. But there was one particular email between him and a man named, was it Rob or Ron? I believe it was Rob Goldstone.
I could look it up, but I missed this whole thing.
He is a British national who is an agent for a Russian pop star who has multiple ties to the Trump family. The 2013 Miss Universe pageant was held in Moscow, and then this pop star then had a music video that Donald Trump himself, the president, actually cameoed in, where he did the whole "You're Fired" Apprentice theme.
Oh,
with
my
it.
goodness.
And,
if you haven't seen that video, it is absolutely worth watching.
It really is. But so apparently the Trump family and this Russian pop star, whose first name and his stage name is Amir. I don't remember his last name, to be honest with you.
I don't think it's actually referenced in the email either. Reading the exchange, they just refer to as Amir.
Yeah, and the emails actually, the invitation to have this discussion in the first place came from Mr. Goldstone, who is Amir's agent of sorts, I suppose, or some kind of manager, I guess, music manager, or music agent, or something along those lines.
Okay.
But yes, let's talk about that as far as the emails go.
The email exchange itself?
Sure, yes.
Yeah, that I guess it's without having it in front of me to reread again, of course, which I don't think is great radio or television for anybody.
Sure.
They're basically saying that there is a lawyer connected with the Kremlin, is my understanding.
Yes.
Contacting them saying that they have incriminating, and not just damning, but incriminating evidence against...
Go ahead and break the mold here, and I'm going to quote from that email, if you don't mind.
Go for it.
Because I do have it on my phone.
Go for it.
And this email comes from Rob Goldstone. It is Rob. At June 3rd of 2016, at 10:36 in the morning. He says, "Good morning. Amin, not Amir, I apologize. Amin just called and asked me to contact you with something very interesting. The Crown Prosecutor of Russia, which is not an office that actually exists, just so everybody knows. Crown Prosecutor is the term for the Attorney General, essentially, of England. I think he's referring to the Attorney General's Office of Russia, which is their federal prosecutor.
Or
Crown Prosecutor,
wherever that equivalent is,
yes,
you mean? Okay.
Exactly. The Crown Prosecutor of Russia met with his father, Aris, who is good friends with Donald Trump, who's a real estate mogul who is often referred to as the Donald Trump of Russia. Aris this morning, and in their meeting offered to provide the Trump campaign with some official documents and information that would incriminate Hillary and her dealings with Russia and would be very useful to your father. This is obviously very high level and sensitive information, but is part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, helped along by Aris and Amin. What do you think is the best way to handle this information, and would you be able to speak with Amin about it directly? I could also send this info to your father via Rona, but it is ultra sensitive, so wanted to send to you first. Best, Rob Goldstone.
Yeah, so I guess and every time I sort of hear this or reread it, my initial thought, what is the level of deniability here? What is...
Well, let's talk about what the response was at 10:53, not far along. Donald Trump Jr. responded, "Thanks, Rob, I appreciate that. I'm on the road at the moment, but perhaps I just speak to Amin first. Seems we have some time, and if it's what you say, I love it, especially later in the summer. Could we do a call first thing next week when I'm back?" And then Mr. Goldstone responds, "Let me know when you're free to talk with Amin by phone about this Hillary info. You had mentioned earlier this week, so wanted to try to schedule a time and day best to you and family."
Right, and this culminated with a meeting.
Oh yes, yeah.
That
Apparently, well,
yeah, I'm not asking.
According to the New York Times and Donald Trump Jr. himself, yes, it did culminate in a meeting that involved a Russian woman whose name, if I tried to pronounce it, I'd still get wrong.
Let it go.
But
but
she's
him,
apparently
Kushner, Manafort, Trump Jr.
Oh yes, okay. So apparently, it culminated in a meeting with this Russian lawyer, who I guess had her own agenda or whatever it was. Donald Trump Jr. made it very clear that he thought he was going into this meeting to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. The Russian lawyer was there, and also Paul Manafort, who had either just become or days later became the campaign manager for Donald Trump.
That was summer. I don't know the exact timeline, but okay, yeah.
So you had Donald Trump Jr. there, you had Paul Manafort there, and you had this Russian lawyer and Jared Kushner. According to Donald Trump Jr., he went into the meeting expecting to get dirt on Hillary Clinton. He got some very vague details.
That's what I was asking you about deniability with regards to that email exchange. Is there any deniability as to whether or not that Trump Jr. had intent to find dirt as provided by the Russians, or this one Russian in particular?
I don't think so.
On the campaign. And is this... Could he deny that he knew the origin was from sort of the Russian state? I mean, just a private citizen with their own interest kind of thing.
The email was pretty clear on that end that it's coming from the Russian government. I mean, the initial thing was the Crown Prosecutor of Russia,
which was
the source of it, saying the Russian government wants to provide Donald Trump this information to aid his campaign.
That's what I'm asking about. Does that construe as saying Crown Prosecutor, which again we acknowledge is not a true title? So can you say, oh well, that's a made up title, it's a made up name? You know what? Because in everything Trump, we see deflection all the time. We see it spin up. We see hand waving. You know, is there room there?
I mean, in all fairness to Donald Trump,
keep in mind that the person who's authoring this email is British. So it's like the equivalent of, one of us emailing someone and saying, "Hey, the Attorney General of Russia wants to meet with you."
Exactly.
Like, that's not their title.
That's not their title.
That's
exactly. And that's
exactly their position is.
That's the meaning I got out of it as well.
Okay.
It's clear not only that this is the person who the information, or at least the invitation came from, but the email is very specific, saying the Russian government wants to give you this information to aid your father's campaign.
Yeah, this information is coming from
The Russian
the
government.
Kremlin,
Yep, the Russian
the
government.
Okay,
government.
okay, and
And
that's
it's
what I
high-level,
wanted to be
extremely sensitive information.
really clear
Yes,
on.
and that's where we are in the first place.
Sure.
Now, that leads us, I suppose, unless you guys have other questions about it, but that leads us to the next point of who is this Russian lawyer? Again, I can look her name up for you if you'd like. I honestly couldn't even try to pronounce it. I mean, I don't speak Russian, and I just
It's
butcher
okay. There's no
Eastern
point in
European
it. There was a Russian lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
And the name doesn't really matter, just the role and what the actual information
Sure.
was purported, I suppose, to be available to her to disseminate to the Trump campaign.
Now, what do we
by
know about the
Junior.
Russian lawyer?
So one thing that I do think is interesting too is that there's a switch in this email chain from, hey, let's have a phone call with Amin and maybe meet with him about it, to all of a sudden this Russian lawyer is flying to the United States to meet with Donald Jr. in person. So like, while, you know, the pop star and his dad may have been sort of the intermediaries that got the ball rolling, at some point this switches from, hey, let's talk to Amin, to, hey, let's get this straight from the horse's mouth, aka the Russian lawyer,
And
who's
now
fly from
interesting.
Moscow to New York to meet with you.
And now, interestingly enough, at least outside of what would Donald Jr. would have known, I suppose, from what I understand, she had applied for a visa for this. It was denied. She was denied entry to the United States.
Really?
And she was still there. Which raises the question,
Wait, how do you know that?
this is a rumor that I have read through the media. I think it was a Fox News article saying... And
For those of you listening, I just did like a little mouth twitch.
Yeah,
When
I
he
mean,
said
well, no.
Fox News.
Apparently, she applied for a visa and was denied it, and she still ended up here to have this meeting,
Okay.
which raises all kinds of questions. But my first question, I guess, for what you guys know, I don't know how much we have collected because again, we're running on media reports, and who knows the actual evidentiary value of them. What do we know about this Russian lawyer?
Well, I mean, I think what's important here is like what, you know, Goldstone, who is very, you know, obviously deeply involved in Russian politics and has a lot of connections.
I think
And
his social
what
media
Donald
accounts.
Trump Jr. thought and knew and understood, who is also someone who's very involved in Russian business. Like, they have a lot of contacts there. I mean, if these guys, who should know, are referring to this woman as like a Russian government lawyer, I mean, you know.
A couple of fun facts based on Mr. Goldstone's proclivity for social media, because he posts on all of the goddamn time. First of all, he checked into Trump Tower for the meeting, saying he was having a meeting at Trump Tower that day.
But he checked in from like Jakarta.
No, that was later. That was trekking in the Trump organization, which was apparently in Jakarta in Indonesia. But before that, he checked into Trump Tower in New York and said, having a meeting, Trump Tower, whatever. But my favorite thing about this man is his, I guess, love or whatever for Russia. The day after Donald Trump won the election, he posted some kind of picture on Facebook in a T-shirt that says Russia in huge letters, and he was like winning or #winning or something.
Oh, God.
I mean,
That's amusing.
yeah, of course this is anecdotal and who gives a shit, but it's still kind of funny.
Right. Well, I guess.
But my question is, do you guys know anything about this Russian lawyer? Because I've done a little bit of research and read media reports.
I don't know so much about her particularly, but I understand in terms of the relevance of the meeting is the fact that what people's takeaway, what the layperson's takeaway, and I'm representing the layperson here, is that this person was a government lawyer from Russia.
She was previously. She was not at the time. She was a former prosecutor for the federal Russian government, like
So as of 2016, she was no
right
longer
in a
officially
country like
connected.
Russia, where the government has its fingers in all the pies. Being a former prosecutor means
Right.
that you
And
don't
that
have any
becomes-
contact with
that
the
becomes
Russian
one of those
government. Come on now,
deniability
that's
things,
At the
though.
time, though, apparently at the time, she worked for some kind of Russian nonprofit type of thing.
Okay.
Russia is
Specifically,
notorious for using people like that as agents.
well, let me.
I mean,
because I think
how
this
they
is-
operate.
I feel like it's still relevant because at the time she worked for some Russian nonprofit whose sole mission was to get sanctions lifted that ended up having Russia banning U.S. adoptions or vice versa.
Right.
Ask yourself this. If the conversation starts with the crown prosecutor of Russia has some dirt on Hillary that they want to share with you, how in the world does this woman who's completely unrelated to the crown prosecutor of Russia end up being the person who takes the meeting? Someone sent her.
The information, absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, and I think when you combine that with,
there's no way she's like some, innocent bystander in all of this.
well, and the fun part is if the reports are true that she actually applied for a visa, it was denied, and she still ended up in the United States somehow when she wasn't allowed to be in the country. I mean, that to me alone raises some serious red flags. I mean, she was essentially smuggled into the country at that point, right?
To take a meeting in Trump Tower with Donald Jr.
Donald Jr., that's correct. Yes. And Jared Kushner and Paul Manafort. Who
Tweedledee and down, yeah, I know.
So, the next interesting point I found about her is the Kremlin denies knowing who she is or if she's even a Russian citizen.
Well,
Of course they do.
That's sort of how they play everything. Oh, we didn't do anything. Oh, there was no. It's just a flat denial of everything. That's
Sure. And
but again, that's my opinion of it.
Yeah, that raises definitely some more red flags there.
Right.
The Kremlin has no idea who this woman is, even though she supposedly used to work for them as a prosecutor.
Okay. How many spies do we unacknowledge when they get caught?
Yeah.
Don't
we call that disavowing? Isn't that the mission
over there?
one?
But
We have no clue who that person is. We're sure as hell not going to pay a ransom for them.
yet this woman again showed up in America to give interviews the same day that Donald Trump Jr. did, the day after his emails. And I think it's kind of interesting to look at what she said. But before we do that, I just want to ask, given what we just talked about, what is this woman's level of credibility? I mean, do you take anything she says as true? Should you take anything she says as true? I mean,
What she said is so absurd. It's just like, your story is that you somehow weaseled your way into this meeting, using the pretense of providing Oppo research
she didn't
to talk about
she did not
adoption.
admit to that. Actually, I believe her version of the events was that she never promised anything and didn't know anything about Hillary dirt.
Yeah, of course, because that's the whole pretext for the meeting, right? So
I think that leads
crazy.
us back to.
it's revealed by the
Trump
Jr. Yeah,
I think that leads us back to the Kremlin's position that they have no idea what we're talking about when they say the election was hacked or influenced by them. I mean, the Kremlin just plays dumb on that.
Yeah. When you combine sort of the cornucopia of facts
And the Kremlin
and the perspectives that they come from,
and the Kremlin has no idea who she is, and she hasn't really explained at all how she ended up in this meeting. Just that she worked for this nonprofit that wanted to reopen adoptions between America, which also was a result of sanctions, which I find interesting. So that leads me to my next point in questioning is what happened in this meeting? And what events do we know based on people's testimony so far?
Where is this? And I wanted to ask to clarify for myself as much for anybody listening or who will be listening. Where is this on the timeline between this meeting and the actual DNC hacks?
About a month
before the information was released. Not before it was hacked, but released.
The WikiLeaks thing happened in July of 2016.
Right.
This is in June.
Which also brings me to a great point on that end, just for
which would indicate that information that hacking and information gathering
had already happened.
Wouldn't necessarily have had to have happened.
I mean, I have to go back and look at the Podesta emails because I'm curious about that now, and I think we'll probably do that as a side note in our next one, our next podcast. But when were the timeframes on those emails, as far as Podesta's emails?
Oh, yeah, when did the hacking actually occur?
We can find out, when was the last email sent, so we could at least know some kind of time frame of when the hacking occurred. But another interesting point with that is that and I know this has been mentioned before, but probably not on our podcast. News leaked of the whole Billy Bush grab her by the pussy thing. That happened earlier in some day in July, and by the end of that day, WikiLeaks dropped the Podesta emails. Same day.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's
calculated.
That's a controlled release.
It's calculated. Yeah, it's my understanding that the WikiLeaks is essentially a clearinghouse for Russian propaganda.
Well, and now that is your own opinion, and I'm not going to make that jump yet. WikiLeaks may have just hated Hillary Clinton, which Julian Assange has made absolutely clear that he hates her and wanted to hurt her campaign. I mean, he made that clear. He's denied Russia was involved. However,
they obviously
the information was obtained via the Russian hacks.
Sure. And
so, I mean,
and based on
it's agenda driven.
Based on the prior practices of WikiLeaks, though, they do vet their emails and decide what they're going to release and how before they do it. There were thousands of emails in that Podesta leak, so I don't think.
Yeah, there's a massive amount.
I don't think that they just decided that same day they were going to leak them, but I think they waited until it was advantageous to release them. But I have zero doubt in my mind that they had already obtained the emails from whatever source they got them from. I think there's 12 U.S. intelligence agencies
12 or 13,
that have concluded that they came from Russia's government. I mean,
and to deny that is basically saying that you just don't trust our intelligence services.
Yeah, America has no idea what it's talking about as far as spy games go.
Yeah, that's the line you have to take, which is preposterous.
That the people whose job it is to know don't actually know.
These are hardcore, deep dive, fully committed, servants of America, essentially, who engage. I'm talking about the intelligence community.
Sure, and so this leads me to the idea of.
I'm just saying that they're ridiculous and off base. I mean, it's just you've gotten absurd. Is what
and again, I'm just trying to be objective because I mean, in my opinion, as a former prosecutor and a criminal defense attorney, the probable cause right now is overwhelming.
Right.
However, I want to reserve judgment so that we stay a little objective here. The next question becomes, what happened in that meeting? And we have 4 sources of information.
Does it really happen what happened in that meeting? Like the fact that the Trump campaign was open to assistance from Russia, that Russia was open to providing it, and then they actually went so far as to meet. I mean, that's a big deal.
We know that the Russian government did provide assistance.
Regardless of whether they did anything after that.
We know that the Russian government did provide assistance to Donald Trump, provided, or at least struck out against Hillary Clinton. It's one of the two. I mean, we know that for a fact.
Right. As far as the Trump campaign via Junior is concerned, that's what's being indicated to them. That Russia has dirt on Hillary,
and they were more than willing to accept.
And they were going out to get it.
They wanted to accept. I love it.
That's what matters to me. Whether or not they actually had anything, or whether or not this lady really had anything, or whatever she could deny.
So what brought me back?
That's what's going on.
They knew that Russia said, "We are trying to help you get elected," and they didn't.
And we're going to do it by providing dirt on Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, this is part of the Russian government's attempts to help your dad's campaign.
Yes.
He got that email, and instead of turning that over to the FBI like he should
have happened,
he's like, yeah, that sounds awesome. How about I meet you for brunch?
Okay. I think it's important, just for a side note, I think it's important for us to talk about, too, that Christopher Wray, who has been appointed by Donald Trump to be the new head of the FBI, actually discussed this under oath today and said specifically, if you are offered information that might even possibly come from a foreign government that could be used as dirt, opposition research, I believe is the PC term for it. that the
euphemism
the Trump supporters have been using. The PC term is the snowflake term, if you will, is
I said
opposition research.
Okay.
If you're offered opposition research from a foreign government, the correct move is to immediately turn it over to the FBI. That was his position. Donald Trump's appointee to be head of the FBI. That was his position. Under oath today.
W. Bush's ethics attorney went on camera before we even saw the email from Donald Jr., when we only knew what the New York Times had said, and he absolutely ripped Donald Jr. a new one. He was like, you do not pass go, you do not collect $200. You go straight to the FBI. That's the only appropriate response to that kind of a solicitation or a suggestion.
I think it's
That's it. Like, why are we discussing like what did or didn't fucking transpire? The fact that he got this information, he got this the Russian government reached out to him, and instead of saying, I'm going to go to the FBI with this, he was like, this actually sounds amazing. I love it.
Okay.
Like, really?
But
really?
Let's throw him the benefit of the doubt for a second and say he's a private citizen who has no idea how election laws or any of this works.
Yeah, you're right. They give zero fucks about federal election laws, and they've shown that they don't care because the rules don't apply to them.
Well,
like,
is that a question of do the rules apply to you, or is that a question of you don't know the rules?
It's a question.
They don't care about the rules because the laws don't apply to them. They have violated campaign finance laws repeatedly, egregiously. Like, like soft money contributions, zero fucks about that. And they do it all the time. And it's been pointed out to them on multiple occasions, and they still continue to do it because it doesn't matter.
Right.
They have never been held accountable for their actions, and until they are, they will continue to give zero fucks about the law. That's just how it works.
To harmonize these two things, no, they probably don't know what the law is.
Yeah.
And two, even if they did know, they still would not give a rat's ass.
And again, I'm gonna go ahead and play that prosecutor card again. Ignorance of the law is not an excuse for breaking the law.
There you go.
It's not.
But they are ignorant of the law because the law doesn't apply to them. They don't care to know it because it doesn't matter.
So I want to go back to that same question I asked earlier. What happened in the meeting, or at least what do we know from the evidence we have what happened in the meeting? Now, there were 4 people in that meeting. We've covered that. Kushner, Manafort, Don Jr., and this Russian lawyer. 2 of these people have spoken out. Kushner and Manafort aren't saying shit. I mean, I don't blame Manafort for being quiet. And honestly, at this point, I really don't blame Kushner for being quiet either, because, that's the smart thing. You don't really turn over evidence that might incriminate you, because you have the Fifth Amendment right not to.
Sure.
So Donald Trump's version of the events was that, at least according to his emails, because he didn't actually talk about this, but he went into this thinking he was getting dirt on Hillary Clinton from the Russian government. Right? I mean, that's what the emails say.
That's his understanding, yes.
So he went in looking for dirt. There was... His opinion was that there was no dirt that actually came up. I think his version of it was she talked about illegal campaign contributions from the Russian government or Russian affiliated people to the DNC or something. And he thought, okay, no big deal. And then the conversation moved to lifting sanctions. Her version of the events was, I never offered anything about Clinton or any dirt on anybody. My entire point was I want my sanctions lifted as far as adoption is concerned. And again, there's another Russian name that goes with that act that I
starts with an M.
Yeah, it starts with an M. I can't pronounce it again. I apologize, guys.
We're so informative here.
Yeah, really.
Logan Act.
But there's a Russian thing, and then a Russian lady.
But anyway,
they have names. But
again, I'm trying to just recap. But her version of the events was this entire meeting was about lifting sanctions. His version of the event was, no, I wanted dirt on Hillary Clinton. I didn't get it, so he moved his sanctions, and then I cut the meeting short after 20 minutes. And again,
both of those
and Manafort said nothing.
Both of those things are a crime. I mean, Michael Flynn is in trouble for discussing sanctions with the Russian government. Like, that's a violation of the Logan Act.
That's a good point.
I understand how either of these situations is preferable. Like, they're both a felony.
I want to save that just for a moment for the next section, but because we're going to get into that.
I mean, they're great points.
That is a great point. We're going to get right into that. But, I mean...
Who knew we would need the Logan acting?
I guess
right?
The question is, do we
Rob
trust...
that bank? I was too busy murdering somebody.
based on what we've heard so far, I mean... Do we trust either one of their versions of the events? I mean, I'm more inclined to trust Donald Trump Jr. simply because he was dumb enough to actually post these emails on Twitter, which, I mean, I'm trying to be objective here, but Donald Trump, his father, the President of the United States, has already set the bar pretty fucking high for stupid things to post on Twitter. And I thought, really, the man wore the crown of dumb shit to post on Twitter until his namesake son decided he was going to post emails showing what they show that we've discussed on Twitter.
Right.
I mean, the bar
I
has
think
been
the
raised.
realistic answer to this question is that there's no way that Russia was like, hey, bro, we're going to give you some opposition research on Hillary Clinton, but don't worry, we're just doing you a favor. You know, we don't want anything in return. You know, there's no tit for tat happening here.
Question.
What's more likely is that they were like, hey, here's the Oppo research. We'll give you a little hint as to what it is, but in return, you have to agree to lift sanctions.
Which, again, we're going to get into in a second, but I want to say, even if that didn't happen, the question comes in, even offering to give the Oppo research.
Soliciting the opposition research from a foreign government is a crime.
Doesn't that even...
Right, isn't that taking a step toward, in terms of, you know, conspiracy, conclusion, what have you?
Conspiracy.
Soliciting assistance or something of value from a foreign nation is a crime.
And whether or not
you actually
get it. The question is what is Russia made clear, at least in the email from Goldstone, relaying the message, that their intent is to see Donald Trump elected. So even if you didn't promise to lift sanctions or anything, aren't you still giving them the benefit they want if you use that opposition research? I mean, they made their intent clear. We want to help your father win.
Yeah.
So even if you don't offer lifting sanctions or anything else, they already made what they want known. If you help
the Russians were attempting to meddle in the election, and they needed someone to help them. Donald Trump Jr. is the patsy. He took the bait, and he helped them.
But he's a surrogate for the campaign, and the question becomes, as a surrogate of the campaign, how much do you speak for Donald Trump himself?
Well, I mean, that's where it plays in with the sort of the vagaries of whether or not you're officially connected to one thing. You know, just like, not to go off, like his daughter sitting in a G20 and things like that, like that they have an official role, but it's kind of unofficial and it's very gray and ill-defined.
It's very clear that they were very, very close, for better or for worse, and that his children are his surrogates. His daughter sat in on his first meeting with the Prime Minister of Japan.
Yeah.
The implication being, she speaks for me.
Oh, okay.
Like, I don't know how you deny that his children are not surrogates. I mean, they are as close as it gets to having Donald Trump himself in the ring.
Well, particularly,
frankly,
we have to
better.
talk about his campaign.
Because you not actually pay attention to what you're saying.
We have to talk about his campaign surrogates in general, but clearly his children were campaign surrogates.
Yeah,
absolutely.
That's not.
Absolutely.
I agree with that.
Is that in question? Does anyone think that's in question? I mean, I know
it was just a thought I had. I wanted to sort of
surrogates for him in business. They're surrogates for him politically. Like that's. I mean, that's just how it is.
I think this leads us into what you were getting at earlier, which is my fourth point: is what else do we know as far as the totality of the circumstances goes? Because before we get into that, let's talk about what criminal law is in an investigation and how this works. Because you don't go into an investigation, a criminal investigation, thinking, I've got one crime locked down and that's all I'm going to focus on. What you're doing is gathering information to use as evidence to meet elements to all kinds of crimes that may be related or not related.
Should we, to interrupt and interject just briefly, just for everyone to bear in mind, and this is also for my own clarification, when we're talking about a criminal investigation with regards to Trump and his presidency, this is something that can't actually take place until he's impeached.
Oh, you're right about Donald Trump himself. Donald Trump, as President of the United States, is immune from prosecution. He cannot be charged with crimes. He cannot be indicted with a crime. he cannot be prosecuted for a crime for anything that happened while he's in office. Something that happened before he was in office or after, well, not after, we'll have to wait till that, but before he's in office that led up to him being in office, he still cannot be charged or indicted with
while he's in office.
While he's in office. Now, he's also still immune from it.
Because this whole time we're talking about treason, we're talking about collusion, we're talking about what may possibly amount to it or not. But I think I just want to be clear with anybody who's listening, and also for myself, again, as a layperson, that none of that can happen while he's still in office. If it's going to hit him directly, that he would have to be impeached first.
Yes, not only would he
be removed from office,
he would be impeached
for that
prosecution. He would have to be
impeached.
He would have to be convicted under that impeachment, and then the Senate would then vote criminal liability, yes or no. They would have to say, not only are we removing him from office, but we hold him liable for his crimes. At which point, he is
and
now...
And then criminal charges can come in.
And it also suspends statute of limitations, in case no one knew that. Statute of limitations is suspended. So if he were in office for 8 years, and we're in the 8th year, and he would have been forgiven for anything except for treason, obviously,
otherwise,
it's a capital offense. There is no statute of limitations on capital offenses, but
Okay,
anything else that would have lapsed under
Jaywalking,
statute
whatever,
of limitations is suspended because of his presidency. So any crime he committed right before, up until the point he was inaugurated,
he's cool till he's out, basically.
As long as the statute of limitations didn't trigger between the time that the crime was committed and the inauguration.
And I just want to make that clear because it's so fuzzy for so many people.
It is.
What's happening here? Because we're talking about criminal charges.
It is.
If that is going to come back to him because they've had knowledge of it and approved of it and things like that. You know, if it gets to that. I know there's a lot of ifs in there.
For Donald Trump himself.
Right.
Now, I'm, right now, at least based on Donnie Jr.'s emails and everything.
Yeah, Donnie Jr.
My concern is Donnie Jr., if he conspired to commit treason and there's enough evidence in the end to charge him with that, it's not a death penalty for conspiracy, necessarily.
They're never going to give him the death penalty.
No, but they could seek it if he committed treason, exactly. But
look, I can dream, can't I, Siobhan?
No one has been
shut the fuck up.
For treason in like 100 years. I mean, even that guy from the CIA who was like leaking like top level intelligence to the government for 15 years. That guy got life in prison.
Yeah. No, I'm saying, but it's an option. It's an option. It's usually punished by
you're right.
death.
It's an option. It's not really very practical. It's possible, but not probable.
No, I have to go back and look at
I'm being hyperbolic and facetious.
Sure, but I mean, I want to cover that because treason itself is a capital crime, which means there's no statute of limitations.
We can totally take him out back and shoot him.
Well, I think actually the prescription in the Constitution, if I remember correctly, is you're hanged by the neck until dead. But I'd have to go back and look that up. I can't say that for sure.
Can we draw and quarter him? That would be fun.
I'm pretty sure you got to be hanged. But I'll go back and look.
Going on?
Obviously, shit's not.
We're talking about textualists here. Let's move on from that.
Yeah, let's please not get into originalism right now. That's a whole nother can of worms. Tuna and every other smelly fucking thing.
To tease that fight as we go on.
But anyway, so that brings me back to my next point that I was asking again. Outside of what we just talked about, what else do we know so far that relates to this collusion charge? I mean, what else do we know? We know about poor Mike Flynn's issues. We know about these massive failures to disclose across the board as far as Russia contacts go. We know about not only the failures to disclose, but even outside of where disclosure was required, the links to so many surrogates with Russia. And, hell, guys, where do we want to start? I mean... There's a lot here. I can start naming names of people who have been involved in the Trump campaign who were surrogates that have been connected. That would be Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Jared Kushner, Jeff Sessions.
Don't forget Betsy DeVos's brother, Eric Prince, who runs Blackwater.
Mr. Blackwater.
Well, what do we have with Eric Prince actually being connected to the campaign?
Met in the facial with a surrogate of Putin.
Okay, so we got that.
December 2016.
Now we can add Donald Trump Jr. clearly to that list, by his own admission.
Yeah. Kushner met with the Russian consulate, was it? Where he was trying to set up a secret line of communication through the Russian embassy so that they could have a direct line of communication with the Kremlin.
Paul Manafort, I believe, was paid by the Russian government to represent them in certain matters against the Ukraine, correct? Is that correct?
He's been politically active with the Kremlin, specifically in Ukraine, but elsewhere as well.
Yeah,
I mean, he's
Ukraine,
campaigned essentially.
Sorry, I didn't mean to talk.
Oh, it was an oligarch who actually hired him for opposition research against the Ukraine, if I remember correctly, right?
But he's also been involved in campaigns and has been paid by the Kremlin.
Yes. Roger Stone, which I don't remember exactly what Stone did, but I know that Stone's consulting firm is under grand jury subpoena based on this collusion investigation for documents from his firm. I don't really remember what Roger Stone did aside from just being a loudmouth cocksucker.
I thought we were trying to stay objective here, James.
No, I'm not going either way.
He's objectively a loudmouth.
I'm not going either way. Certainly not an actual comment or derogatory term to male homosexuals, but or female heterosexuals for that matter. But no, not anywhere in there. Just Roger Stone's a loudmouth cocksucker, as far as the term goes in general. This is not an indictment against him, from my opinion, on whether or not he worked for Trump or Clinton or anybody else. He's just a loudmouth cocksucker.
Here, but to put a pin in this just for a second.
Sure.
To put a pin in the cocksucker.
And that's okay.
Yeah. What this comes back to is we can all have our opinions on these things, and we can weigh in and this and that. What it really comes down to is how is this going to impact Mueller's investigation?
Oh, sure.
What I want to know as a person who's admittedly chomping at the bit to see really bad shit happen to the Trump administration, because I can't stand the bastard. All right.
R.I.P. the stock market.
Well, do you really think the odds are that Mueller doesn't already have this information?
Mueller,
realistically, he probably has it already.
Oh, yeah.
And he's just waiting until he finishes his investigation before he drops it.
Right.
But Kushner and Trump Jr. are trying to get out in front of the shitstorm and control the narrative by leaking the damaging shit before the investigative report comes out.
This reminds me, fun fact, Mike Pence yesterday, through his spokesman, wanted to make it very clear that he wasn't part of the campaign when Donnie Jr.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, you know why? Because he's getting ready to become president.
Yeah, of course he is. And that's my thought, too. And my initial commentary on that, outside of trying to be objective, is just that we get it, Mike. We fucking get it. I hope you're watching this, Mike. We get it. You're a sanctimonious fucking Boy Scout. We know, bro. No one suspects you of being involved.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
No.
I mean, I think his one saving grace is
like... You're a goddamned altar boy, and we know it.
Right. Okay.
So the question
all
is,
that
okay,
said,
so
is yes. When
let's
we're talking
recap
about these
what
things,
we know.
What do we think this is gonna? And we're still armchairing it a little bit, but that's what we're here to do.
Yeah, that's the point.
Is to say, what is, if you're Mueller, what is your takeaway of this? How are you going to use this? Can you use this? Is it realistic to say? Is this now fire and not just smoke?
And I'm going to get to that in just a second because, first of all, to answer your question on that, Donnie Jr.'s emails to me are the first sign of licks of flame. I see flame. I mean, that's fire. That's fire. I mean, I don't know how you feel about it. I know you're desperately looking for fire.
Well, see,
you're a fucking park ranger sitting on top of your smoke outpost, just staring.
I'm like striking matches.
I know exactly. So you're trying.
So here's the thing: I can have what I want, but it is still important for me to be skeptical and say I don't want to invent this in my mind.
And we should be skeptical. I mean, that's my point when I kept saying I want to be objective.
Which is why I keep checking myself against. Well, what is what are people really saying about this? What does it really mean? Is this real? Again, of course, you're objective. I have my partisan stance on it. I have what I want this to be. But I know at the same time, wanting some shit to be real doesn't make it real. So,
I'd like to point out...
I keep trying to scale myself back a little bit.
And while we talk about this partisan thing, I'd like to point out for any of our Republican constituents that are Trump supporters watching this, Several of you were invited to participate in this conversation. You refused to do so. I have several refusals on record, and I'll Joe Scarborough that shit if you want me to. I can prove it with the actual text messages. I couldn't find one of you to actually stand up and try to argue anything about this. I mean, I see plenty of your arguments, and again, I want to be objective, and I'm trying my best to be. But again, I have a prosecutorial mindset, even as a criminal defense attorney. I mean, my job as a defense attorney is to have the prosecutorial mindset and do damage control. This is what I do for a living. I'm telling you, a grand jury's going to have a fucking field day with some of this if they really go for it. But so I want to go one person by one person and talk about the actual evidence we have before we keep sidetracking and getting off.
Sorry, I'm trying to.
Let's start with our good friend Michael Flynn.
Let's do Flynn. He's fantastic.
What do we know about Michael Flynn? Well, as far as evidence going towards any kind of collusion or anything going here.
That he was unmasked as part of wiretaps, right?
He was. How did we come to that?
The bad guys.
Let's talk about how we came to that. Siobhan, I know you know about this. You want to tell us about it?
What, about Michael Flynn?
Yes. How did we get to even having Michael Flynn's names in our mouth? Aside from, President Obama and his administration beforehand saying, don't trust him, he sucks. And firing him.
Yeah. I mean, Flynn, first off, he's a certifiable tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy theorist. And then he obviously was having communications with, the ambassador to Russia that he shouldn't have been having.
Okay, wait. No, I want
yeah, an official relationship with the Trump administration, after the election.
Let's talk about this specifically, though. I mean, what I'm asking is, what do we know about Michael Flynn as it ties into this actual... But how did he get fired? What did he do? By Donald Trump, mind you, not by Obama, because he got fired by Obama a couple years before. But let's talk about how he got fired by Donald Trump, who made it.
Right. Well, he got fired by Donald Trump because the media outed him as having had communications with the Russian ambassador before Trump took office, where Flynn basically said, don't worry about those sanctions. We're going to lift them as soon as Trump is inaugurated in January, which is obviously a violation of the Logan Act.
Do you know when those conversations took place?
Was that December?
These were in December of 2016.
And from my memory, they took place the day after President Obama put sanctions on Russia for election hacking, correct?
Yeah, I mean, it was either the same day or literally the day after.
They expelled dozens of Russian operatives and Russian affiliates. They took control of Russian compounds that were considered, I guess...
Like Virginia and Maryland, I want to say?
I don't know if they were necessarily embassies, but they were diplomatically immune. They were compounds.
They were residential.
So they took control of that and expelled dozens of Russians who were operatives or affiliates with the Russian government from the country, who were at least maybe suspected of being involved in this election hacking thing. The next day, Michael Flynn is on the phone with the ambassador to Russia with the United States, the Russian ambassador to the United States. Kislyak, I think is his name.
Correctly.
That's correct.
Well, apparently it wasn't even just on the phone. Like, that's how the wiretapping happened, is that they picked up that information.
I apologize. No, I'm sorry. He discussed with Kislyak.
But he also met with Kislyak and Kushner in Trump Tower in December of 2016.
Yes, I apologize. We're mixing up facts. We're mixing up facts. The wiretap wasn't on Kislyak. It was on Russian spies. Actual Russian spies.
Right.
Like operatives of Russia, part of their intelligence community. Yes.
Yeah.
Mike Flynn.
So early December of 2016, Flynn meets with Kislyak and Kushner, and then they talk about establishing a line of communication or whatever. The implication is that they talked about, the relationship with Russia. And then on December 29th, is the same day that sanctions were imposed.
Yes.
And on the same day, Flynn talks to Kislyak again and says, don't worry about those sanctions.
No, I don't think he talked to Kislyak again. I think he was recorded. Kislyak wasn't tapped. It was because we can't, again, diplomatic immunity, we can't tap the ambassador himself. I thought we tapped Russian spies, actual intelligence operatives. Or suspected
they were listening in on the ambassador's calls.
It was the ambassador himself.
It was a conversation between Flynn and Kislyak.
I'm gonna have to look that up and clarify it, because my understanding was that it was actual Russian spies, like actual suspected intelligence operatives.
Well, I mean, Kislyak runs.
Well, sure.
So.
I mean, yes. And in case listeners, if you don't understand how spy games work, we run our spy games, and the rest of the world runs their spy games through embassies. Ambassadors are in charge. They're run in the United States. We run all of our spies through the State Department. That's how it works. The CIA is fed through the State Department. They're allocated by the State Department. They are operatives of the State Department, theoretically. They are...
because they can abuse diplomatic immunity
through
and
ambassadors to each country.
And all that.
That way, if they get burned, they can get the hell out.
Exactly, and the ambassador takes the fallout, and the ambassador has diplomatic immunity.
Right.
So, and it's mutual. We grant.
So, Kislyak, in sort of his cohorts in this arena, these are the people that are being looked at. So, if Kislyak himself cannot be tapped, then it's all the people around him are being tapped.
Exactly, and that was my understanding. It was Kislyak's people.
And part of what occurred essentially, and I'm just trying to do the broad strokes on this, is that these other people around Kislyak were tapped in part of the unmasking, so we could understand the relevance of the conversation.
They were tapped.
Included Flynn and
they were tapped legally by the FBI as part of a counterintelligence surveillance operation that we do all of the time. Is very routine. That's what we do. We don't unmask citizens of the United States unless it's relevant to the investigation. However, so this conversation's recorded, and I'm sure somebody in the FBI said, "What the fuck? What are these guys talking about?" And so they pass it up the line, and it gets to Susan Rice. God bless her. But it gets to Susan Rice, who then says, "Yeah, unmask this person. Clearly, somebody high up is talking to a Russian ambassador or Russian ambassador's affiliates or whatever about lifting sanctions with the United States and promising Donald Trump will lift these sanctions the day after the sanctions are passed or the day of. I can't remember which one it was, but either way, it's pretty damning. So Mike Flynn is then unmasked, and we have verification of this across the board. Sally Yates verified it as the reason that she started all of this shit.
And to come back to, he was fired by Trump because my understanding is he did that shit and then told Pence that he didn't.
Yes, that is the official White House reasoning. Was that, mind you, Sally Yates warned the White House 18 days before he was removed.
So she knew and they knew.
She knew. Oh, yeah, because she's in charge of the FBI. She was acting DOJ.
But the reason he got fired... Sorry, go ahead.
He got fired because the media outed him.
Right.
And then he's like, well, shit, now we can't keep it under wraps.
Yes.
Now we have to fire him.
And the official... Well, let's stick with the official excuse, because, I mean, that's pretty fucking obvious. But thank you for covering that. I'm not trying to discredit you.
That's what I'm getting to.
Because the Washington Post came out and reported.
They can say whatever the hell it is they want to say, but the truth is that they knew, and they didn't do anything about it until it was outed, and then they had to.
Give credit to the White House.
Okay.
Don't ask me that.
I mean, look, as far as... I'm trying to think of it from a trial attorney perspective, especially in criminal law, sources of authority do get an assumption or presumption that what they're saying is true. You can always rebut it. And there is a shit ton of evidence to rebut it, don't get me wrong, but to give them a presumption, their narrative is he lied.
Is that a legal, like, precedented thing?
Yes.
Because that sounds like
across the board.
You're conflating logically an appeal to authority with a fallacious appeal to authority, because
I will tell you that
I would not consider it to be a legitimate
from the bottom
authority.
of the barrel to the top of the barrel, with law enforcement or anyone in a position of power that's elected or not, they are given a presumption of truth. How strong that presumption is entirely rebuttable.
Siobhan, you're making a face. Do you disagree?
But that's true, is it not?
I do disagree, because that's actually, like, I mean, for instance, if you have a police officer on the stand, like, you're required to instruct the jury that they're not allowed to give that officer more weight as far as him being more credible, specifically because he's a police officer. Sure. Because he's a human being, like anybody else.
Oh, yes. No, as far as...
This bullshit as the other people.
Yeah, no, you're right about that, kind of.
So how does that interplay? Explain.
Well, as far as any type of motion or anything that has to do, like, say, a motion to suppress or something like that, law enforcement is always given a presumption of truth. It's not a strong presumption, but it's there. we presume their testimony is truthful and accurate. I mean, judges do that. Triers of fact in law, when it's a judge, it's a presumption.
But how explain that in light of what
it's
you
not,
just
it's
said?
not a presumption.
And I remember hearing the exact thing because I've been a juror a couple of times.
Sure.
And I've heard that entire spiel about...
As a trier of fact, as a juror, you're not allowed to give them any more weight than anyone else. However, under probable cause and probable cause determinations, grand jury, anything like that, they carry a natural presumption. They're not instructed on the presumption, but it's there especially for judges. It's recognized, it exists.
I agree with that, but it's not official.
Sure.
And you're acting like it's like Chevron deference or something.
No,
thank you for pointing that out.
Fair, and you're absolutely right.
There is an innate, proclivity to believe authority or police officers or whatever. And you see that every day. But it is not a rule of law.
No,
it's not a rule of evidence. It's actually contrary to the rules of evidence.
That's true. Trier of fact determines the weight of fact. What is fact, what is not. The evidence weighs that way.
Credibility.
Shout out to Mark Borden if you're watching this. Suck my fat fucking cock. Anyway, continue. He's not. Trust me. Sorry, I had to do it. But that's one other story for another time. If you guys want to know about that, please post something or ask me.
I don't care why, because I don't
to explain.
like him.
But anyway,
I'm sorry. If people want to know about that fucking cock,
just continuing. I apologize for being on this diatribe. I just wanted to say we should give some credence to the White House says. The White House says they fired Mike Flynn because he lied to President or Vice President, soon to be President, Mike Pence.
Right, but stop just for a second. That whole thing we just went through. There's the presumption of assuming that they're factual and all this other things. Where one, you're saying that it's unwritten, it's not official, and two, because we know the facts of the matter, we know they're fucking full of shit.
No, we actually don't know the facts of the matter. What we have is evidence.
No, we know that.
You discern the facts.
We know that what they're saying is probably bullshit.
Yeah, based on the Yates testimony. Thank you. That's what I'm trying to get to.
And the question is Yates credible? Yates
yeah.
the question butthurt about being fired. She might have lied. Same with Comey. Could have lied. Could be perjury.
But that okay, I understand you're trying to put some,
I'm objectively, I'm saying that their testimony doesn't necessarily be taken as golden because they testified to it under oath. That doesn't
I agree where you're going with that, but also it's important to recognize that the Trump administration has not denied anything that they have said. They didn't deny that Yates told them.
That's true. Actually, that's a good point. Comey's testimony was denied across the board by Donald Trump. It was. Well, again, it was denied.
Right, it was. At the same time, the things that he denied were preposterous.
Okay, yes, I understand.
Right. But
trying to be objective.
Back to Yates and what she said about Flynn.
No one did deny Yates, and really that's provable. There are going to be records with the White House General Counsel.
So it would be easy to prove if it were not true, and they have not done so. If it's easy to rebut and you don't rebut it, the implication is that what she said was true, and you're not saying anything because you can't say it. You cannot credibly say that she's full of shit. That's what's happening.
So she testified that Mike Flynn, 18 days ahead of schedule, was compromised. Not to use the word compromise. There's a Russian word I can say.
Subject to blackmail.
But no, she basically said they have compromised. He's fucked. He is entirely compromised. He's not credible. He is a risk to this country.
He accepted money from Russia and hasn't disclosed it. Violation of the rules governing retired military officials.
And all that stuff.
Yeah, was that her testimony, or was her testimony based on the wiretap? I thought it was on the wiretap.
I think her testimony was based on the wiretap, but in addition to that, he also accepted a bunch of money from,
Let's go back. Yeah, let's go back to the fact. Let's recap real quick. Because we beat this horse, but I think it's pretty fucking clear.
We went a little bit off on a rabbit trail, but
we're pretty clear here that
so.
Mike Flynn promised to lift sanctions against Russia on behalf of Donald Trump, either the day of or the day after President Obama put those sanctions in place, based on election hacking. So we know that. Let's move on to our other friends. I don't even know where to begin with the failures to disclose. Because again, I think I listed a lot of people. We have Donald Trump Jr. He failed to disclose things. Paul Manafort, Roger Stone, Jared Kushner, Jeff Sessions.
Yeah.
We got anybody else? I'm sure we do. I'm just forgetting people. Anyway, we know it wasn't Mike Pence. He's made that clear.
Oh yeah, and then there's Carter Page.
Carter Page. Yep, Carter Page. Anyway, so let's break them down one at a time. Let's start with Paul Manafort. What do you know about Mr. Manafort, Siobhan? Because I think we were talking about this earlier, and I know you know a thing or two about Mr. Manafort. Tell us all about it, darling.
Oh man! All right, let's see. Paul Manafort has been paid to promote Russian interests in the United States. He joined Trump's campaign in 2016. I mean, he's previously basically run campaigns for Russia, and specifically in the Ukraine and stuff like that. I mean, he dating back to I think it's 2006, where he basically has a deal with some extremely wealthy Russians, that involve manipulating politics and business deals. And he's been working with them since 2006, 2009, and he then joins Trump's campaign in 2016.
Who was the one, and if you don't mind my asking, because I think you know this too, because I mean we talked about this a little bit before. Who was the person who was paid specifically to oppose the Ukraine, do opposition research against them?
That was Manafort.
That was Manafort. Okay.
He was paid by a pro-Russian Ukrainian political party, and they ended up winning the presidential election in the Ukraine.
The main financier,
he ended up sort of being
the main financier was a Russian oligarch who is the godfather, or vice versa. Putin is the godfather of one of his kids, right? Something like that.
I don't know specifically, but yeah, I mean, he is backed by Russian.
There's close family ties with the person paying one of these people to Putin. Jesus, we go into Kushner and Kushner's deals, real estate deals with Russia. Or we could talk about Donald Trump's himself, or the Trump organization. Sorry, I always mix them up. What is Donald Trump's actual business organization called? Is it the Trump Organization? Trump Enterprises?
Yeah, Inc. But I can look that up.
One of them is, Mr.
The Trump Organization, it sounds like, is the sort of overarching.
That was my understanding. The Trump Organization tried desperately to link up with our friend Amin's father, Eris, to create land deals in 2013 with real estate in Moscow, and they fell through. I think that's worth talking about as well. And I believe Donald Trump himself was involved in those, but they didn't work out with Donald Trump and the Donald Trump of Russia.
I mean, but in terms of,
that's
going beyond showing that there's connections there, in terms of things that are
things that weren't disclosed. I mean, Donald Trump himself has come out on the record and said, "I have zero ties to Russia financially at all. Never been involved." I think that's worth talking about. No, but
I mean, why lie about it if there's nothing there?
So what do we know about Roger Stone?
Why lie about it so extensively and repeatedly and have everybody involved in your campaign and your organization lie about it? All of them are lying about it.
Thank you. That's what I was getting at.
That's what I'm getting at. But my next question is, what do we know about Roger Stone specifically and his lies and his connections with Russia? Aside from the fact that he's a loudmouth cocksucker, I covered that. But let's continue, because I just don't like Roger Stone. I never liked him before he even mentioned the name Donald Trump. I just never liked Roger Stone. He's always been a loudmouth.
So what you're saying is you're not being objective.
Well, that's a personal opinion. That's a personal opinion. I'm not giving weight on either political end or whatever. The man himself is a loudmouth cocksucker, in my opinion. I just don't like him.
Okay.
But I'm going to stay out of it.
But moving forward,
I want to ask if anyone knows anything about him, because I do know that there has been a grand jury impaneled against his firm in connection. The FBI is impaneled a grand jury. Sorry, let me clarify. The FBI, DOJ is impaneled a grand jury against his consulting firm in connection with Russian collusion. I know that. They're seeking documents. I don't know what they're subpoenaing or anything like that, but I don't know if we know anything else about what he's involved Does anybody?
I can't comment further on it now. That's,
I mean, he has been in contact with Russian hackers. I think the same ones that were pulling a lot of the DNC stuff. Like, what is his name? Guccifer or whatever.
oh,
Gucci
Ghost for 2.0. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
a whole nother.
That's a whole other can of worms.
We
Yeah,
can
let's
talk
not-
about Paul Smith and that whole thing, but I think we can.
That's why I don't want to get too verbose
'cause-
on any of these two guys.
yeah, I
we
agree.
spent a lot of time on Flynn.
And
that-
and we know Kushner has a lot of real estate deals and things that are in question. Also, the trying to set up a direct channel with Russia,
Which
to
is a funny way of
bypass
saying,
Congress,
like,
to bypass any kind
it's
of.
not bypassing anything Russian, by the way. I want to make a point of this.
No,
This
we're
is
bypassing the United
the
States.
United States
We're
end of it,
bypassing
like,
our
and
own
just
intelligence
rolling up
agency.
into their embassy and just talking, which is
Yep.
so great for Russia.
That was
Really
that was
not-
that
that's
was
smart
his
for us.
suggestion, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Is he wanted to set the channel up in the Russian embassy.
Right, exactly.
Which is
You guys remember that
just
thing I talked about just a minute ago about how spy games work and how we use fucking embassies as our spy bases?
Right. Can't imagine why they would want
Gee,
that at their embassy.
how is that a good idea? Okay.
literally zero strategic benefit to the American side of that. That is literally playing right into the hands of the Russians.
But
I mean,
I would like to mention the fact that, too, is that Mr. Kushner is a senior White House advisor. The rest of these people have been fired or ostracized because the press already got them. Mr. Kushner, on the other hand, is still in power and has been charged with, Jesus, I can't even remember what Trump charged him with from the beginning, but it was peace in the Middle East. And,
Right. Well, yeah, Kushner is supposed to be acting as sort of the de facto
thank you
Secretary
for
of State.
remembering that.
yeah.
You know, that basically Tillerson has been cut off at the knees, and he can really do nothing, can't really staff his own people, and Kushner has been sort of pushed forward to be in charge of these things. So, you know, titles and, you know, job duties of these, you know, these holders of office, it's all been obliterated to just whatever the fuck Trump feels like having, you know, people that are interested to him to do these jobs, you know, i.e. Kushner in this case. Like, and it's this
I mean,
has nothing to do with treason or impeachment.
I
It's just the
feel like
half-assedness
I feel
of,
like we've talked a lot about evidence that we have.
yeah.
And so this leads me to my final point. that I'm
Let's
gonna talk about.
just come right down to it, because there's so many rabbit trails here.
Guys, are we broaching treason?
Does it amount to treason?
I
I like
mean-
his notes. It's like treason in all caps with an exclamation point, and a very
But I've got to ask, like, are we?
Scott Pilgrim versus the world.
And I
kinda
want to
credits.
I want to come out and say, you know, constitutional law is one of my favorite subjects, and we've talked about this before.
Sure.
We can do that all day long. Again, I'm an originalist and a fucking conservative, and I guess if I were to ask my constituents here, I'm a piece of shit, but whatever. I don't.
You can be
your
better.
ideas.
I don't.
Oh,
Well, thank you for being civil about
Yeah,
it.
there you go.
Yeah. So
You just think shitty things.
hey, at least I'm not wearing a fucking iWatch or whatever this shit.
Irrelevant. Let's go.
Anyway, so treason though, I don't believe that what Donnie Jr. has done on his own is treason. I don't think it rises to that. I do.
I think it's wrong. Definitely a crime.
Yes, I think there are criminal aspects that really need to be considered, and if I'm him, I'm getting concerned, and I'm starting to look at how comfortable does Venezuela really look. You know, like, where can I go?
I should follow the advice of my super expensive white-collar criminal defense lawyer.
Who said, "Shut the fuck up, Donnie Jr."
Exactly. His lawyer, who like handles RICO violations for fucking living, is probably like, "Dude, don't post that." And Donnie Jr.'s like,
No, I'm
"No,
getting out ahead of it, bro. I got it. It's cool.
Oh my dear.
Leroy Jenkins on the tweet.
Leroy
don't
Jenkins.
email chain."
All right, but seriously, I want to point out, I don't think Donnie Jr. has committed treason. I really don't. Not based on what we know, based on these emails and everything. I don't. Do I think he's part of a conspiracy to commit treason? No, there's more to that.
Not necessarily the same thing. But let's put just to clarify for people, what are we talking about when we're talking about treason? Because the reason I'm asking, because it's very subjective. Because every time a president or elected official does something that you don't like, it's treason and he's un-American, and hang him high.
Well,
right?
I mean, if
let's
I go
get
back
away
and,
from the
if I go
subjective
back and look
bullshit.
at,
What's the legal
Trump,
definition?
Before we do that, I was going to say, if you go back and look at Donald Trump's tweets, pretty sure he charged Obama with treason simply for being born Kenyan, which he wasn't. But Anyway,
exactly.
But let's talk about what treason is actually, and
don't let the facts get in the way of the story, Jim.
And
God.
And honestly, I broke it down to simplify it. I mean, if you want me to, I would be happy to read you the constitutional definition. But
I'm just asking you. I'm a guy walking off the street. What is treason
Really
really
the elements, James?
How would you explain it to me? Give me sort of the high points on it.
Whoever, owing allegiance to the United States, levies war against them, or adheres to their enemies, and giving them aid and comfort within the United States or elsewhere is guilty of treason. It is punishable by death.
Gotcha. Okay. So, following that immediately, how do we define what is our enemy legally?
So, well, hang on. Let's talk about what actual elements mean in crime, because I think we should probably discuss that, because, I mean, I know Siobhan understands, and I think you have somewhat of an understanding too, but really, if you're on a jury, you're charged with finding beyond a reasonable doubt every element. So we have to start with each element. 1, owing allegiance to the United States,
which is every citizen of the United States.
Sure.
All of
damn right. And if you say otherwise, fuck you, get out of my country. Next. 2, and this is a 2-parter. You can choose either one. We have the word "or" in there.
Yep,
2,
just need one.
levies war against them, or...
Which means like an actual enemy combatant against U.S.
Yeah, basically
crazy
starts
kids that
a
converted
war
to
against them.
Radical Islam and are shooting at American soldiers.
You are not allowed as an American citizen to go, you can't go fight for another country in a war. Like, the only exception to that has been during World War I and II, when we sent basically our CIA agents over to Britain on behalf of Britain.
Okay.
But normally you are not allowed.
But
to
yeah,
fight
they got to pass, and
as a soldier for a foreign country, it's not kosher.
So basically, don't shoot at our soldiers. All right.
You have 2. Well, no,
it gets more than that. I'm trying to move us along. Come on.
levies war against them, meaning actually tries to bring war against the United States as somebody who has allegiance. Obviously, that doesn't count in this situation. I haven't seen any of the Trump surrogates try to levy war against us. Or adheres to their enemies. Now we're going to talk about what that means in a second. And, which means we got to bring the 3rd level in, giving them aid and comfort. So you could really make comfort a 4th sublevel. Within the United States or elsewhere, being the 4th element. So, let's talk about it. Obviously, we know owing allegiance, anybody who's a citizen of the United States, or somebody even who is proclaiming to be an ally of the United States, still owes allegiance to us. I think everybody in the Trump campaign surrogacy, they all owe allegiance, right? Anyone want to deny that? I don't think so.
No, I don't think so. No.
Yeah, that's
moving right along.
The levies war against them. We obviously know that didn't happen. Or adheres to their enemies. What does it mean to adhere to an enemy?
I don't know, James. Why don't you tell us?
Thank you for feeding it right back around.
I appreciate that. Talk about
don't ask questions you expect to answer.
No, and now I want to invite everybody involved, the 2 of you, to offer textualism analysis to it, because these are words you can adhere.
It's written down in front of you.
Oh, adhering. We're going to adhere meaning to them. That's crude.
Dude, you're killing me. It's 10:30.
Sorry.
Right. Explain to us what you mean by adhere.
What does it mean to adhere to an enemy? I mean, that
sounds like to help them in some form or fashion.
Sure. It essentially it's really to join their cause.
Right.
Is what it is. Is any kind of level of joining their cause. I mean, there is case law on this, except for the only downside is most of the case law is from 100 years ago or more, so it's kind of outdated considering everything as far as precedent goes. But basically what it means to adhere to an enemy is to join their cause in some sense, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm getting. Yeah,
sure.
Basically you're here to
so
help
not only have you
some hostile foreign power.
For that second, third element, little conjunction is not necessarily have you adhered to them to join their cause, but have you given them aid and comfort? And now this is hotly contested, but
it would seem to me that that's how you would indicate that you have join their cause by giving them aid and comfort. That would be
I
my
would
that would
say
be my takeaway.
My opinion, personally, is pretty fucking indicative of adhering to their cause. But
Yeah. Okay.
I like how you repeat what David says as if it is a new and original thought.
But I did stay at the Holiday Inn.
I happen to have a Yale Law Journal article from 1918 on this subject. If you'd like me to read all 20 pages,
nobody wants to hear that.
I didn't fucking think so.
We want to know if the Trump campaign committed treason.
Ambien tonight, and that would help. That'd go a long way towards putting you to sleep right now.
Giving them aid and comfort. Again, the question is, how do you define aid? How do you define comfort? And obviously, the last piece is, did it happen within the United States or elsewhere? So let's start breaking some...
That means everywhere. That means literally everywhere.
It sure as fuck does.
It means either in the United States or anywhere in the known universe. Or
as long as it doesn't happen on another planet, David. Another planet. Because we're talking
right now, we're having discussion because, again...
Interpreted with the originalist intent in mind, they didn't think space travel was a thing. They still thought the Earth was
flat. It counts the multiverse. So if it happened
on Mars, it's not treason.
So when I sell these motherfuckers out to the Martians...
Oh my God.
I didn't commit treason, and fuck all y'all. I'm your overlord. But anyway, so let's get serious. What does it mean to adhere to their enemies? We obviously covered what does it mean to adhere. We would say...
It means to join their cause.
To join their cause.
And so aid and comfort...
Who is an enemy? No, who's an enemy?
Okay. Yeah, this is what I asked you like 20 minutes ago.
You better put that dog down. That's a major distraction. I'm sorry, I love dogs. That's not cool.
This is why this is not going to the podcast.
Okay, so anyway, though...
This is a YouTube show, y'all. Tonight.
Yeah. Okay. So what is it? Who is an enemy? Because under put that goddamn dog down.
Stop. James, focus.
I'm trying. This is an adorable dog.
That's what I do. Right. James is my resident lawyer. I poke him with a stick and make him say legal stuff. Like, man,
this is why we're not allowed. Dogs aren't allowed in courtrooms either. Anyway, enemy. What is an enemy of the United States? I mean. Realistically, back in the day, an enemy was somebody you were actually at war with by declared war. I mean, we declared war, you're an enemy. And that is the understanding. I mean, even going back to our last real definitions of treason, that's what it is by precedent. Somebody we've declared war against is an enemy.
Okay.
So, obviously we haven't declared war against Russia.
No.
Like, ever. I mean, in the history of this country, we've never declared.
No, I know. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Right.
Of course, mutually assured destruction and all that.
Yeah, we never declared war. We've not. Congress has never declared war against them. I have to ask a question though, just so we can get on the same topic. Were I right now, 2017, were I to leave this country and start providing secrets of the United States to ISIS? Would I be declared an enemy of the state?
I would think so, yes.
Well, there's precedent for that, actually.
Yeah, I mean, haven't American citizens who have have fought for the Taliban or fought for any other extremist group? I mean, they've been captured and they've been tried for treason.
There was a young man in the state of Yemen who just happened to reside in a terrorist camp for Al Qaeda, who was murdered under direct authority under President Obama. He was killed by a drone.
By a drone strike, yeah, I remember that.
A U.S. citizen for being an enemy of the state.
By a drone.
That was challenged. That was actually challenged. And habeas corpus was suspended and found to be realistically suspended because he was an enemy of the state. He was an enemy of the state because he allied with an enemy. Al Qaeda was an enemy. ISIS is an enemy.
No declaration of war.
Not even close to a declaration of war.
That's the salient
So I think
point
it's
there.
pretty clear that a hostile foreign government would qualify.
And what qualifies as hostile? Because now we've gone from enemy to hostile. What qualifies as hostile? Because
foreign government.
We do training exercises with the Russian military. So are they hostile with us? Like, what?
Well, gee, are we in
a
conflict right now in Syria against them?
No.
I mean, historically,
no, we're actually
we can be, but
we're against Assad. Who backs Assad?
Russia backs Assad.
Who do we back? ISIS. We back ISIS in Syria. Yes, we do. Yes, we do.
That's kind of fuzzy.
No, it's not fuzzy. We give them directly money and weapons. We give money and weapons to ISIS in Syria, but we declare them an enemy in Iraq.
Fucking really?
Yeah, fucking really, dude. welcome to foreign diplomacy. I would say, for purposes of the statute, Russia counts as an enemy since, I don't know, they were attempting to influence our election to sabotage democracy.
My understanding is that we gave aid to Islamist forces that were fighting against both ISIS and the Assad regime, but not ISIS themselves. But it's like a different flavor. It's like ISIS that just wants to stay in Syria versus ISIS that wants to conquer the world.
That's cute. What does ISIS stand for?
What is it? Islamic
State in Syria and Iraq, or Iraq and Syria.
Sorry. Right. Versus just Syria. It's a nuanced, very thing. We're so off fucking topic right now.
No, we're not. No, we're really on topic. That's the point. Is how do we define an enemy?
Patrick is already like, okay, buzzer, y'all.
And my point is that no, that's not. I mean, that's how you define an enemy. We have no way to define an enemy in 2017.
So,
Russia.
Does this become so vague that it doesn't stick?
That's my.
Again, the guy. I want some shit. I
don't mean it to stick. No, I mean it in the sense that it sticks on a broad sense. Do we have a problem with these people? Yes. Were they, when they interfered in our election, attempting to undermine our own democracy and control it with their moves? Yes. That makes them an enemy in my book. They're an enemy of our American democracy, right?
I mean. Yes,
Are they an okay?
I'm not saying do you and I think so. I'm saying
I know, and I'm saying there's no
what's
case
Mueller
law.
going to say? That's what I want to know.
There's no case law that defines that. I mean, this is brand new territory. So my question becomes, if you're an adversary,
so you're useless here.
No, as an originalist, it's a term. As a textualist and an originalist, it's a term means enemy. In my opinion, if your intention is to be an adversary to my government and my election system and my entire rule of law and my constitution, you're an enemy. It's pretty fucking clear.
I mean, I don't disagree.
Sure.
So,
Siobhan?
We're
going to analysis at this point again. Because our case law is 100 years old, so
Yeah, but anybody who the student who pays attention to the relationship between the United States and Russia will tell you. We have a fundamental difference of opinion with them. They will never be an ally.
It's
especially not
correct?
Britain, an ally, or Australia. I mean, Russia is fundamentally an enemy. We don't agree.
They're adversarial, correct?
Yeah, adversarial. I think that's a good way to characterize it.
Adversarial, yes. So, okay.
We may, the enemy of my enemy is my friend situation with them on occasion, but when it comes
sometimes
to the
our interests are mutual.
Yeah, and the last time we did that was World War II.
Yeah, but we've been fighting against them either directly or indirectly for decades at this point.
And does anyone want to say that the Stalinist Russian government was our ally? Even if we had shared interests.
Russia against the Axis. That didn't happen until later, and we only did it because Russia was willing to, instead of giving their soldiers guns, they were like, "Hey, we'll just put some bodies out in front of those Germans."
And if they turn around, we'll kill them too. But okay,
exactly.
So let's say that for the sake of argument, we've covered adhering to an enemy.
Okay.
Next question, because it's an and, it has to combine the two. Giving them aid and comfort. What is aid and comfort? Again, I'm asking a question here.
Well, to me, okay. I'm framing in my mind. I'm framing this in terms of promising to lift sanctions, right? Mm-hmm. To me, that's the big thing. We've established that Russia's relationship with us pretty much always has been and will be and is adversarial, making them in effect. And this has not been hammered out in some Supreme Court case.
No, it hasn't. No, that's what I'm saying. It's been 100 years since we've even addressed
They're essentially adversarial. Makes them probably an enemy under legal definitions. Has aid been given? That's fuzzy. Has comfort been given? Yes.
Okay. My question then becomes, what is aid?
Well,
What is
thing
comfort?
too? Is like, realistically, if they're going to help you, it's a tit for tat situation.
Sure,
They're going to
quid pro quo.
expect something in return, even if it's just favorable political dealings once you're elected. I mean, there is no such thing as a free lunch.
If you
is what
adhere to what they wanted, so we assumed adhering to them was helping them, or adhering to their cause, which was making Donald Trump president. Giving them aid, wouldn't that necessarily be joining their
becoming
cause?
president?
Well, yeah, not necessarily. They made it clear, we want Donald Trump to be president. We want to sabotage your democracy. We want to sabotage your elections. We want Donald Trump to win. So we're going to join that cause.
So I'm saying seriously, as
to help you do it.
Seriously, as silly as it sounds, simply by winning and becoming president, would that not constitute aid?
Possibly.
If this is what they wanted, and you help make it happen.
They're intentionally trying to, hurt Hillary Clinton's campaign with, leaking the standard information, and Kushner and Manafort and Trump Jr. are like, yeah, we will help you damage her campaign by helping you get that information out there.
Right.
Sure.
And Patrick agrees.
Okay.
He's like,
So
that's
absolutely disseminating that information.
Sure. And my next point with that is that giving them aid also would be promising, at least, or trying to fulfill the promise to lift sanctions. I mean, the whole purpose of sanctions is the opposite of aid, right?
Sure.
It is to make life harder for them.
Right. That is the point of
If you make life easier for somebody, what have you done? You've given them aid.
James, we're way off into intellectual ivory tower circle jerking territory right now.
Hey man, sorry. Welcome to textualism, but okay. So comfort too, same thing.
Doesn't textualism suck? Sorry.
Oh man, it doesn't suck when it's delivering what you want.
No, I'm just saying in terms of whether or not this is good television / radio.
Sure. But I mean, aid and comfort, we can pretty much assume, if we're going to just throw it out there, aid and comfort would be lifting their sanctions and making their lives easier based on wrongdoing they've done in the past to our country, right?
Sure, yeah.
We're certainly increasing their trade. We're making trade easier on their country. And I mean, do we really need to debate what within the United States or elsewhere means?
I think we already covered pretty much anywhere in the multiverse that counts. So,
well, unless you want to engage in textualism debate, in which case Mars doesn't count.
Oh my gosh.
True. Well, we've covered that. Okay. So within the planet Earth, right? So in Russia or America.
Stop. We get it anywhere. For practical purposes, anywhere. Okay.
I think
we've covered that.
Honestly, my point with all of this and bringing that up and the whole treason elements are, we are fast approaching at least conspiracy to commit treason. Ah, Jesus, you got two of them. Anyway, we're getting close to conspiracy to commit treason, at least in my opinion.
I think, yeah, but you said not treason, but it sounds like we covered.
No, I don't think Donnie Jr. himself committed treason. I'm saying totality of the circumstances. The Trump campaign has been involved in treason, or at least close to it.
But
there's
Donnie Jr.
evidence
specifically.
No. I think Donnie Jr. is an element of it or a contributor to it, but I don't think his emails.
He matches all the elements himself.
Yeah, he's not on his own treasonous.
Okay.
That's what I'm getting at.
So all that said, we think, or I think, based on what you've told me anyway, that Mueller has a lot to work with. That he's, if he didn't already know, he certainly knows now. Between what was leaked and what Donnie Jr. has come out with, you were killing me.
No, but seriously, I mean, yes, I would say that there is plenty of evidence here, at least for the entirety of the Trump campaign. If you're going to look at a totality of the circumstances, there's evidence for at least conspiracy to commit treason. I mean, we're dancing the line.
The intent is advertised. Actions were taken. That's my understanding.
And exactly. Conspiracy is a plan that is illegal
and
an action taken in step further into that plan.
Right, which the meeting would
Exactly. You actually have to do the illegal thing, but you agree with someone that you're going to do it, and then
you're going to take a step forward.
Right.
And I mean, Donnie Jr. definitely took the step forward and made that pretty fucking clear in his emails.
Yeah, it seemed.
Hey, I love it. Let's have this meeting.
Unambiguous.
Yeah.
To me.
I love it. Let's do it. Not even just like, hey, let's chat on the phone. It's like, hey, no, fly your lawyer in from Russia, and we'll talk at my office. With my brother-in-law.
Fly that lawyer in. Not your lawyer, but that lawyer.
Right.
Yeah, lawyer. The Kremlin lawyer.
Yeah, the one from the Crown Prosecutor, right? Like.
So this sounds, this sounds bad, but it's still wait and see. It's still wait and see.
Oh,
still,
God,
yes. We're not there yet. It's
not
come out officially. This is our armchair.
Guys, and also, I think it's important to consider the fact that everybody ever involved in the Trump campaign, including Jeff Sessions, everybody except Donald Trump could be indicted and prosecuted. And Donald Trump could stay president for 8 years. And he could never be charged with any of this. And he could walk out of all impeached. Unless he's impeached and convicted.
And that's a political move.
And then, after he's convicted, the Senate then hears the issue of, should we hold him criminally liable?
And then, yeah.
And the political reality is that even though we have all of it come out, you still have, like, the GOP saying, like, meh, nothing to see here. It's like, really?
On top of that, I want to point out that no matter how much the Democrats love the idea of the fact that they might take the House in 2018, they're pissing up a rope. Like, 39 states out of the Union are starkly red. Overall. That's the way it's going to be.
Thank you, gerrymandering.
So,
but speaking of this whole thing and, whether or not seats are going to go another way, to sort of segue into the end of this, I did want to bring up, having really nothing to do with any of this has just come out, that Representative Brad Sherman from California has introduced articles of impeachment against Donald Trump.
He actually filed them.
They've been introduced. They will go nowhere. We want to say, I'm amused. It makes me feel enthusiastic.
Do you know what
it's
the charges
fun.
are under each article?
This was, my understanding, the broad strokes. This has to do with obstruction of justice. Back to Comey and his testimony and what happened there versus any of this, versus any actual collusion, any actual potential treason against any of that. None of that is part of this. This is about obstruction of justice, which I sort of originally thought was the stronger charge. Rather than all of this. Before this email came out, I was feeling a little more fuzzy on it. Like, maybe there's something to it, maybe not. Is it more likely that nothing happened and Trump, being Trump, decided he didn't like the noise from the investigation and tried to squash it and did something illegal? That was, my thought.
I think I was to some extent on board with you as far as like Trump himself being involved in collusion with Russia. I thought for sure there was enough smoke and enough points between his surrogates, especially on the campaign, regardless of whether those same people are now in his administration, at least for this campaign. They had so many ties to Russia and so many like shady as fuck meetings with them that there's just no way that they didn't do something, right? Like there's something there.
Right, sure.
I was not really on board with like Trump himself being involved, but I'm with you. I was like, he's for sure, he's going to pull a Nixon and he's going to obstruct justice, even though he didn't do it himself. He's going to obstruct justice to cover up for his surrogates who did do something wrong.
Sure.
And now I don't know. What do you think the odds are that, Kushner and Manafort and Donald Jr. met with the Russians and like talked to them on multiple occasions, and that Trump himself never knew? Like, that's not possible. He's such a microman.
But there's
no.
What we think probably happened versus what's legally actionable. That was always sort of the perspective that I took. Is what can he really be nailed on? Essentially.
Well, and I think that.
But again, to come back to, and I know there's so many side issues to get into. That this guy Sherman, filed articles of impeachment for obstruction of justice. It's a funny move. It's my concern that it's going to sound a little bit cry wolfy type thing.
Sure, but I mean this is the first
time
the Democrat has tried to introduce articles of impeachment for obstruction of justice against Trump. But I do want to touch on that for just a second. I mean, realistically, the evidence that we've talked about, whether or not it's credible, I mean, again, you have admissions from people, but either way, does that not go to obstruction of justice? I mean, does that not feed the narrative that
The
Trump
fact that it
knew
wasn't
exactly
reported to
what he was
FBI.
doing when he told Comey to sit the fuck down?
It would, but I don't think that was part of these particular articles, as I understand they were filed.
You sure?
Not 100%, but I think because so much of this is exploding, so much of this has not been hammered out, it has not been,
Sure.
fully explored from a legal avenue. That the fact that this guy was working on these things and he'd been chomping at the bit for a while, apparently, as the story goes, and so he filed them. And I think, really, if there's a strategy involved there, I think it's trying to get as many Republicans sort of on record saying, no, we're not going to impeach.
But
for when this gets
sure,
worse.
well, I'm sure.
And so now it's something they will always have to defend against.
I will ask you, have you ever seen articles of impeachment or read them?
Not
because they're
personally,
very
no.
vague.
I mean,
they don't.
well, high crimes and misdemeanors, right?
Yeah,
What
exactly.
the hell does that
Well,
mean?
sure.
Nobody really knows.
Cool that he didn't wait until Mueller came out with this report.
Exactly.
And that's what I said too.
What's so weird about it is that,
do you think Mueller's going to drop a report, or are we going to get that as part of evidence? Are we getting Mueller's report as part of, as part of, like, you think he's going to release that ahead of time, or do you think we're going to get Mueller's report as part of the criminal record involving these indictments? Like, I mean, is that discoverable as a police report?
How it happened with Ken Starr, like the Starr report came out before Clinton's indictment.
But was,
I mean, he was indicted based on information.
Was Starr a special prosecutor?
What?
Was Starr special counsel?
I thought he was appointed.
I thought he was a House. What was the term?
No.
House manager.
Starr was an independent special prosecutor.
He was.
I'm
Okay.
pretty sure he was, yeah.
Well, yeah. Again, I mean, obviously, you went to Baylor.
You need to be a solicitor general.
You know.
Right.
You should be familiar with what Ken Starr did. He was your dean.
But again, coming back to...
He was an independent special prosecutor, and he'll tell you that the office of the independent special prosecutor has too much power and should be abolished. He will say that.
Oh, that's good.
Which is ridiculous, because we have situations like this.
Really, he's a big fan of birds.
Back to this.
Sure, he's not a big fan of consensual sex.
I'm raising a point.
Only unconsensual sex is okay with him.
Oh my god.
Sorry, that was a little low.
That's okay. I don't mind him necessarily. But when this was filed, it's for anybody who saw this and goes, oh my god, Trump's getting impeached. No, he's not. When Sherman filed this, he knew it was going to go nowhere.
Yeah.
So I'm suggesting
I would assume.
probably the gamesmanship involved here is to get all the Republicans to say no for when something more serious and real comes out. It's much harder for them to deny it and then be like, oh, well, the first time this came up, you said no, nothing burger kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's a point they'll always have to defend against, thinking again in reference to 2018.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yeah.
That's what this is about. That's what anybody's takeaway should be. Not thinking Trump is seriously about to be facing impeachment right now over what this Sherman guy has written up in these articles.
Boy, he's hedging
that
his
was
bets.
the point I wanted to make.
It is drawing a line in the sand of like commit or don't. Yeah. Like what side of this are you on? I mean, and the odds are is that
he's hedging his bets a little bit.
You're hedging I think you're hedging
ridiculous.
Well, we've just spent 2 hours talking about that. It's probably a pretty good bet that this is going to get worse for the Trump administration.
I think so too. I think you're hedging a lot of bets that you think it's going to happen before 2018. But
I mean,
possibly.
honestly,
of course, the snowball is seriously getting larger as it rolls down.
I mean,
well, yeah. I mean, this stuff usually takes a really long time to unravel, and the fact that we are like 6-7 months into this presidency, and the snowball is already as big as it is, like.
Right, that's true.
I mean, it took Nixon how long before he was
6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Significant.
Yeah. We are talking an order of magnitude of 10 here. 6 months.
Yeah, it's true.
And shit's unraveling really quickly.
Yeah, and the other aspect is the desire for instant gratification.
Well, of course.
And that's just how we are these days.
Information travels faster now, too.
But I think,
not only that, but the number of wounds that are self-inflicted by the Trump administration are staggering.
Yeah.
They just aren't savvy. They're gullible. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, that's really what's happening. Is like they are shooting themselves in the foot repeatedly. Would Nixon ever have would he have ever written an email that said shit like that? No. Would he have ever published it to Twitter? No. He's smarter than.
He didn't have email or Twitter. I mean,
right, but you can't assume that someone who's...
If that were a possibility, would he have done it? Like, James, when you have communications with clients or expert witnesses or whatever that you don't want to be discoverable, how do you handle them?
phone call.
I do it over the phone.
Phone call. Phone fucking
Everybody's
call.
got a fuzzy memory of what happens on phone calls.
I don't know
I don't
what
put
the
it
hell you're
down.
talking about. You have no proof of what my phone call consisted of.
Exactly. I never put it in writing, and I never put it in an email. Ever.
Unless I'm
Right.
James
Like-
Comey and I want to record him.
I think if there's
Yeah, I mean,
if there's
in which case, like, I frame it the way I want it to look. Like, follow-up email to opposing counsel. Hey, thanks for that phone call, Bob.
Yeah.
Here's to reiterate what we talked about. Like,
where you
you
said
know,
your clients are...
I can frame it where I'm like, hey, you
Cocks.
promised me I'll do it.
I think there's a point to end this on. I think that's what maybe is astonishing or unique about this whole process. As you said, that Trump and his administration continues to shoot themselves in the foot with their gross incompetence and just their lack of savvy in doing shady shit. That despite that, it's taken this much time even, and it's gone so far, and we're still going, maybe, I don't know, do we got him? How bad do they have to be? And how much more do we really need to see this amount to something? I think that's what.
Yeah.
I think that's really what inspired us doing this episode tonight.
Yeah, it's just kind of this
It's
idea
a what the hell moment.
Yeah.
You know, kind of thing.
I mean, now we're talking about treason.
No, I mean, you
we
keep
actually-
talking about wanting a smoking gun, and it's like, this is a gun that's still firing bullets.
Yeah, that's right. And even then, you go, is it enough? Is it Is it the gold-plated Trump 45? I had to do it.
That's funny.
And that's pretty much what it seems like. And will it blow up in their faces?
Yeah, I think that's where we're at.
Made in
It's
Russia
really a
from Chinese
question of
parts.
Is that, made
But-
in Russia from Chinese parts. It's about
And
par.
that's and that's where we are right now. I think probably based on our analysis that there's probably enough there.
Well, at
Current
least
articles of impeachment are
preliminary and
and
early.
they're premature, truthfully. But I think that's a known thing.
And I mean, just giving a general opinion, I honestly think treason's a little premature too. I mean,
yeah, no, I don't think we're quite there.
I
yet.
will say, however, I was never really talking treason until recently, and we're kind of getting there. And now I'm starting to look at the elements of treason and going,
It kind of
shit,
sounds like,
man.
but you have to remember, you have to caveat that this is based on what we've talked about and what we've decided amongst
Very
the three of
true.
us here, being a guy who stayed at the Holiday Inn and two actual lawyers.
Yeah.
Versus what's going to get hammered out in uncharted waters legally.
True.
In terms of what's treason, who's an enemy, and all
Yeah.
this stuff.
Oh yeah, no, and this is like I said, this is based on a 100-year-old precedent.
There's a lot
Like,
we don't know yet.
we really don't.
And there's much that we think, but
It's,
not a
it's
lot that
it's
we know.
certainly building, and there's room to argue across the board.
Absolutely.
And
that's what we want to leave you guys with. But I think for now, we've beaten all the points to death.
Yeah, I think
and
so.
gone off into the multiverse and
Well, I mean,
loudmouth cocksuckers and everywhere.
Hey.
Even if no crime was committed, I mean, I think that it is important to recognize that, Donald Trump Jr.'s willingness to engage with the Kremlin's willingness to offer support and meddle in the election is problematic. I mean, it's problematic that you knew that the Kremlin was trying to help you, and that you were open to soliciting and taking that help. I mean, at the very least, it opens you up to blackmail.
I mean, I have to wonder. They accepted, or they tried to accept help from a pop star's manager and a pop star and the pop star's dad.
Doesn't that sound Trump though to you? It sounds very Trump,
Oh, fuck yeah.
Trump-esque, Trumpian. Yeah.
The Trumpster fire.
Yeah,
Guys,
it is. It is a complete
America,
Trumpster
I
fire.
want to tell you, I love you all. I love every one of you, even if you're a dipshit. How on earth did you vote for this man?
Because we hate Hillary. Because they hate Hillary.
No, I get
Whatever.
that, and I totally get that because I hate her too.
All right.
but-
Not going off
Anyway.
on that tangent, but I think that's going to be it for us
Yep.
for tonight. I think
gotta end with that.
again,
question.
like I said, we've gone all
How'd we
around
get?
everywhere. We've hit the multiverse. We've hit treason. We've hit impeachment. We've hit
Yeah. Oh, Lord
Flynn
Almighty.
and Manafort and
what we know so
and-
far
and-
as
and
far
little-
as this whole collusion thing goes.
Will Jr., who turned out to be the dumber son.
That's impressive, actually. I really thought Donnie T was the worst.
You know, I don't like it when a guy like Colbert can admit he's made a mistake. You know, because he thought Eric was the dumb one. But that being said, and that's my little partisan wedge in there.
Sure.
But
yes, I think
that's going to be it for us for tonight. Siobhan, thank you for joining us. Thank you for lending your thoughts on the matter.
And following us down this rabbit trail of fun times.
All the rabbit trails.
And thank you for sharing those adorable fucking dogs. I mean, that was
cool. They were very cute. They were very
cute. But yes, I guess for Fermenting Opinions, I'm James McVeigh.
And I'm David Poseidon.
And that's Siobhan Ray. And we are done here for the night. Thank you for joining us.
All right.